My half of the company is legally mine. My wife bragged online, claiming half of my $2.4 billion empire and threatening to sue. But she didn't know every word she posted triggered the clause that erased her from everything she thought she owned. The champagne glass was still cold in my hand when I read the comment. Half is mine. Legally, there it was, bold and presumptuous under the photo she posted from our terrace, the one overlooking the skyline. My company's logo, blurred just enough to look like a power play rather than grounds for a lawsuit. It was supposed to be a celebration. The IPO had launched at 9:30 a.m. By 9:42, it had already far surpassed projections. By lunchtime, reporters were calling me the quiet rocket man of logistics tech. That afternoon, Forbes published the cover. My face, our name, the valuation, $2.4 billion. I built it from a storage unit, no funding, no press, just 22 years of never asking for a round of applause. And there she was holding a glass of my reserve champagne with her freshly manicured nails, posting. Couldn't be prouder. As if she had ever spent a single night packing orders in that freezing, unheated concrete box. At dinner that night, she laughed too loud. She leaned into a circle of her new friends, all surgically filtered and lawyer-connected, and joked, "Once the B-series closes, I am buying that island in St. Vincent. I have earned it." That was her new favorite phrase. I have earned it. It is funny how she never said that when I was eating beans out of the back of a van because we could not afford rent. She did not post selfies then. She did not smile about the partnership when I was sleeping at the office with a 9mm under my desk because someone had broken in the week before. But now I was a prize, a feature story, a source of envy. She showed me off like a walking stock ticker in heels and highlighter. Then came the post that broke something inside me. She was standing on the marble balcony, the one I had installed after we closed our first international vendor contract. Glass in hand, hips angled towards the sunset. That bright smile of someone who believed she had already won. The caption read, "Built from the ground up. Half is mine legally." I did not comment, did not reply. I did not even tell her I had seen it. I just looked at it for a long time. Not with anger, not with sadness either. It was something else, something quiet and calculating, like watching a fox walk into a trap you did not know you had built. The quiet pride turned into a quiet alarm. By the way, if you are still listening and have not subscribed yet, now is the time. Over 90% of people just watch and move on. But if you hit the subscribe button, it really motivates our team to keep creating these stories. Anyway, after she posted that, she walked into the bedroom and kissed me on the cheek as if nothing had changed, as if her digital stake in my empire were just a flirtation. She browsed property listings on her tablet while humming a song she used to hate. I watched her from the doorway. She was bookmarking listings in Kashmir. And for a woman who once helped me wipe engine grease off of receipts in the garage, she no longer seemed to care where the money came from, only that it flowed without interruption. But this is what she did not know. She thought she was playing house with the CEO. She did not realize the man she married never actually worked for the company, because the man she married did not need a salary. He wrote the blueprints. He structured the contracts. He owned the skin underneath the skin of the company. The parts you can't see on a cap table or in an annual report. She was not robbing a man. She was kicking a hornet's nest of clauses, kill switches, trusts, and time bombs, thinking it was just a paper hive. And with that one comment, half is mine. Legally, she pulled a thread that had been waiting quietly for someone just like her. I walked past the bedroom without a word. She was too busy on FaceTime, showing off the pool to some influencer who called her babe 5 times in 30 seconds. She laughed like a teenager, tossed her hair back like a trophy, and did not even notice I took the scotch from the sideboard and disappeared down the hall. My office was the one place in the house she never took an interest in. She said it was too serious. The bookshelves, the old file cabinet, the locked drawer she pretended not to see. I sat down, turned on the lamp, and opened the bottom drawer. Not the one with receipts or stock options or the charitable donations we never claimed. No. The drawer underneath the one I had built a false panel for back when the company was just 3 guys and a server rack held together with duct tape and desperation. From that drawer, I took out a simple leather folder, no label, no logo, no fancy embossing, just the truth. Inside were documents I had not touched in years, but every page was memorized. First, the diagrams, nested shell corporations structured with precision, branching out across jurisdictions with names that sounded like Wi-Fi passwords. Then, the ownership charts. How the intellectual property never technically left my name. How the algorithm patents were all licensed, not sold. The public-facing company was just a front. The real ownership was buried like a vault. Nevada trusts, offshore custodians, licensing agreements with renewal triggers. No one could accidentally trigger them without detonating a clause or two. And the thumb drive looked ordinary. I bought it at a gas station years ago, but it held the crown jewels. Time-stamped intellectual property agreements. All signed before the company even had a receptionist. Audio memos, private contract drafts, a memo from the original legal architect I hired, one who specialized in founder-first protection structures. He once told me, if it ever turns on you, don't fight. Just activate. I did not even need to plug the drive in. I knew what was on it. Every agreement my wife had never seen. Every clause that would invalidate her claims if she ever tried to make them. Every time-stamped signature that proved she was never part of the ownership conversation. Only the lifestyle that came after. She thought she married a builder. She did not realize I had stopped building years ago. After the first acquisition deal collapsed because a co-founder's ex-wife contested the equity split, I made a vow, no more clean lines. Everything would be layered like armor. I spent 3 years and more in legal fees than she spent on handbags to structure this fortress. I became obsessed with indirection. Our tech IP licensed to the parent company, but held by a private vehicle. My name appeared on a payroll once. I drew consulting fees for 2 years through a Wyoming firm, and then I stopped entirely once the holding structure was complete. From the outside, I was just a charismatic founder with bad posture and a decent backstory. But behind every smiling photo, every TDX stage, was a stack of legal time bombs designed for one thing: to survive betrayal. It was not bitterness. It was not paranoia. It was realism. I had seen too many brilliant men get torn apart in court by people who once whispered, "I love you, Miss Heard," while memorizing their login credentials. She never asked about the licenses. She never asked why I never got a W-2. She was too busy living the story. She loved being the founder's wife, the dinners, the board seats, the interviews where she could say we and our journey and our house, the one I spent 20 years on. While she rewrote our past for a photo shoot, she saw herself as the CEO architect, but she never looked at the blueprints. And now she was walking into a war zone built on paper, clauses, and a reinforced silence. Every contract she never read was a tripwire. Every post she made was a breadcrumb leading her straight to them. She thought she was divorcing a husband. She was picking a fight with a ghost hidden in a dozen LLCs, and I was no longer going to pretend that was not exactly the plan. Years before she ever uttered the word divorce, I was standing barefoot in a freezing hotel room in Reno, staring at the blinking cursor on a legal intake form. It was 2:14 in the morning. My flight had been, and the hotel smelled like stale coffee and bad decisions. I had just come from a tech conference where a venture capitalist panelist warned a room full of arrogant 30-somethings. The biggest threat to your company is not a competitor, it is your co-founder's girlfriend. Everyone laughed. I did not, because I did not laugh when I watched a friend lose 2 patents and a stake in his own company over a poorly timed engagement ring and a fight that turned into an alimony circus. I did not sleep that night. I researched. I called a lawyer in Vegas who only answered because I used the phrase LLC series and dropped a reference name that made him sober up mid-sentence. By sunrise, I had formed the foundations of what would become my shield, a Nevada LLC series. Each subsidiary had its own firewall. One owned the original algorithm, another the vendor routing patent. A third, completely separate one was structured around the IP licensing. None of them were in the public-facing company's name. None were traceable in a single-step search, and all of them funneled ownership benefits to a single private trust, mine. The name everyone saw in the filings, the one the media loved. That was a rented identity. I designed it that way. A legally distinct and completely public shell entity that operated under renewable contracts and borrowed authority from the real machinery buried 5 levels deep. Think of it this way. She married the showroom. I lived in the basement where the schematics were hidden. She was there for the press photo when we opened our second campus. What she did not know was that the land was not owned by the company. It was owned by a private real estate LLC that I had formed with the IP Trust as the beneficiary. The company paid rent to the holding company, which paid dividends to a blind trust. That trust paid me a consulting stipend, technically independent of any salaried employee classification. So no, I was not on the payroll, never had been. And when I say licensed by me, I mean exactly that. Every line of code, every internal tool, every piece of vendor technology, including the AI routing model she bragged about at parties, all originated in a private development repository that I maintained for over a decade. Before the public company even existed, I had already filed provisional patents and structured a time-release licensing scheme. And here's the kicker. Every licensing agreement had termination clauses, meaning if a divorce, a civil dispute, or a public claim involving the company or myself occurred, the license could be revoked at will, not canceled, retroactively and automatically revoked, pending arbitration, which would take place not in a public court, but in Delaware, behind closed doors, and under the authority of the original private entity. She would not even be allowed in the room. That was the genius of it. The deeper you looked, the blurrier it became. She could subpoena all the employee records she wanted. She would not find a thing. She could demand cap tables, employee contracts, even HR emails. I did not live in those files. I lived outside of them. Was the ghost in the infrastructure? The truth is, I never expected to have to use it. When I built it, I still believed in us. I still thought maybe she would want the life, not the leverage. But then came the parties, the new wardrobe, the shift from how is the team to do we look richer than the couple next door. I watched her slowly mutate from partner to parasite. Not all at once, just 1,000 little recalibrations. 1,000 moments of what's in it for me. I stayed silent. I played the doting husband. I let her believe I was just a programming genius who got lucky. That our life was built on a shared vision, that she could shout, "Half is mine," into the wind and not get a subpoena. But in reality, every time she smiled for a photo in our house, she was standing in front of a rented wall. Every company dinner she hosted was charged to a card owned by a shell account, and every time she clicked her heels across the glass lobby like a queen surveying her court, she was walking on floors paid for by a man who disappeared from the books before the ink was dry. She thought she was sitting on the throne. She did not see the trapdoor under her feet. She did not call first, did not text, did not even leave a note on the marble countertop. She once made me tear out because it was not photogenic enough. No, she sent a process server, a smiling, overly coiffed 20-something who arrived at the vineyard gate as if it were a movie premiere. 2 paparazzi vans were already waiting by the road. I guess someone tipped them off. Maybe her stylist, maybe her new Pilates best friend who accidentally follows more divorce lawyers than fashion brands. Either way, the envelope arrived hand-delivered, thick, white, scented, as if she thought it should smell like victory. I watched from my upstairs office window as the gate intercom buzzed. Elena, our estate manager, answered. I heard her clipped voice through the hallway speaker. Mr. Fenton, someone is here with documents for you to sign? Of course there is. I walked down the long hallway, opened the front door myself, and stood there silently while the kid said, Delivery for Mr. Thomas Fenton, you have been served. He tried to sound tough, as if he were handing me a grenade. I took the package, nodded, and closed the door with no expression, no drama. Then I walked straight to my office. I did not even sit down. I just placed the envelope on the scanner bed, closed the lid, pressed the button, and waited. The machine hummed, clicking frame by frame, turning every word into digital permanence. I saved it as a single, unedited file. I named the folder Clause 17B, activated, and dropped the PDF inside. Then I leaned back and looked at the wall, because this is what no one told her lawyer and what she never bothered to ask. 4 years ago, buried inside the original intellectual property licensing contract between the core trust and the public-facing corporation, was an obscure, boring clause, hidden under renewal terms and arbitration procedures. Clause 17B. Any legal or litigious claim filed by a related party against the primary license holder will constitute an immediate breach of contract resulting in the automatic revocation of shared use privileges, data access, and internal company communications retroactively effective to the date of filing. Translation. She had just nuked her own access and her lawyer, with his courtroom swagger and his self-assured espresso breath, had no earthly idea. The irony, I warned her not directly, but once during one of our late-night, wine-fueled debates, when we were still talking like partners, she asked what would happen if a lawsuit ever came from inside the house. I told her jokingly, "You better hope not. The licensing stuff is not friendly." She laughed. She thought I meant penalties. She did not understand that the penalties were automated, pre-scripted, silent, that once she signed her name and filed that suit, the system would take care of the rest without me having to lift a pen. No passwords, no approvals, just the detonation of a tripwire. And now that she had pulled the trigger, the entire security matrix built across 5 states and 3 countries was already adjusting. Her company login flagged, her cloud access slated for purge, her building access card reclassified as inactive, internal communication channels revoking permissions in real time. Even her assistant's Slack login, tied to her permissions, would be cut off by midnight. It was not personal, it was architecture. I did not yell, did not cry. I did not even call my lawyer. He already knew. We planned this years ago. Hell, the clause folder's name had not changed since I created it. It was waiting. What she filed was not a divorce, it was the launch code. She thought she was walking into a courtroom for a split. She did not know she was trespassing on a private licensing agreement, one she never read, never asked about, and never imagined could hit back harder than any prenuptial agreement. And the moment her signature hit the docket, everything she thought she was entitled to started to slip through her fingers, not with a drama, but with a dull, legal silence. The kind of silence you can't scream at. 2 days after the filing, she pulled up to the office in her white Kaylin, the same one she insisted on ordering with full specs, so she could look the part at Leadership Summit, the one she was never actually invited to. She parked in the founder's reserved spot, which, of course, she was not listed on, and walked past the security hut with no eye contact. She was wearing her statement blazer, the red one she saved for investor dinners, and the mock TED Talks she practiced in front of the mirror. Her heels clicked against the lobby tiles like gunshots. She swiped her card at the glass doors. Nothing, no green light, no buzz, no welcome tone, just a red flash and a quiet beep, like a digital shrug. She frowned and tried again. Another red flash. The receptionist, a new girl barely 25, looked up confused but calm. "I'm sorry, ma'am, you are not in the system." She smiled smugly. "That's ridiculous. I am Mrs. Fenton. This is my company." The receptionist did not flinch. "I'm sorry. You are not listed as a visitor either. If you like, I can call someone." "I don't need an escort," she snapped. "I helped build this place." The receptionist did not argue, just picked up the phone and asked if facilities wanted to deal with her directly. They did not. That was the first crack. She tried to call Chris, the VP of operations, the same one she once asked to reconfigure the executive floor so her side of the building was more aesthetically aligned with her brand, straight to voicemail. Then she called her lawyer. "This is exactly the kind of intimidation tactic we expected," he said smugly. "Let them play hardball. We will file a motion for emergency access." She liked that, emergency, made her feel like the victim in a show she directed. But by noon her devices started to fail. First, her laptop. The moment she logged into the internal dashboard, error code, account deactivated. She tried to access the archived notes, gone. She went on Slack. Her profile had vanished as if she had never existed. Then the cloud drive refreshed to blank. Folders missing. Access revoked. The presentation she had been working on for the upcoming Wine in Tech crossover event, replaced by a system message. Access denied. User not recognized. She checked her phone. The work email that forwarded to her private inbox blocked. All archived threads auto-purged. She called IT directly. "Hi, this is Emily Fenton. I'm sorry, we can't confirm employee details without a current employee ID. I am Emily Fenton. I'm sorry, ma'am. You will need to speak with Human Resources." But Human Resources already had quiet, long-standing instructions. The moment Clause 17b was triggered, internal compliance tools kicked in, access lists updated, audit trails locked, her credentials marked as terminated with prejudice, an internal designation used for hostile actors or parties in breach of contract. To the system, she was not a co-founder's wife. She was a security risk. She sat in the front seat of her Cayenne, her fingers trembling as she refreshed her screen over and over trying to log into something. Anything that would give her a foothold. And there was still nothing. She texted her assistant, Emily J. Because yes, she had renamed her assistant Junior as a branding joke, but the text did not go through. Green bubble, not registered. Her assistant's number had been scrubbed from the internal phone directory. Even her email signature had vanished from recent replies. She checked the online company directory. No mention of her, not even as a board advisor. Her bio had been replaced with a blank space. She was a former contributor now. She did not get it. How could they block her from something she helped introduce, promote, smiled, and waved for? She did not know that every email she had ever sent from her company address was technically routed through a third-party server under the IP license umbrella. She did not know that the photos on the website were under a brand use license, and that license had expired the moment her legal claim was stamped, and she definitely did not know that every trace of her access had been mapped, scripted, and scheduled to disappear 2 business days after the trigger conditions were met. She thought they were punishing her. She did not understand that this was not personal. It was the machinery deactivating a compromised terminal, and for the first time her anger gave way to something else. Not confusion, not frustration, but fear. The kind of fear that sets in when you realize you have been trespassing in a world that was never yours. And now the walls are folding inward. Not loudly, not quickly, but methodically, with no exits. 3 weeks later, she sauntered into the courthouse as if it were a launch party. Fresh blowout, designer suit with a matching briefcase. Even her walk was different. Theatrical, purposeful. Her legal team flanked her like a presidential entourage, all dark suits and arrogant efficiency. The lead guy, Martin Kell, a partner at a firm so expensive they charged for water, laughed as he glanced at the docket. "This will be over in an hour," he said to one of the associates, loud enough to echo down the hall. She smiled smugly, as if she believed it. Her confidence was surgical. She greeted the bailiff like a regular, crossed her legs just so as she sat at the plaintiff's table, took out a sleek leather notepad, clicked her Montblanc pen, and leaned in to whisper something rehearsed to Kell, who chuckled in response. She scanned the room, clearly expecting me to arrive with some lone, overworked lawyer, fumbling through a manila folder filled with hope. But I was not late. I was already sitting. The same gray suit I had worn to the IPO reception, the same black watch, the same silence. My lawyer, Caroline Dunn, was not loud, did not smile, did not shake hands. She carried only one object, a sealed navy blue envelope, standard legal size, no markings, except for a date stamped in silver ink on the flap. The judge entered. Everyone rose. My wife still legally adjusted her collar as if she were prepping for a magazine cover. The judge called the case. Fenton versus F. Fenton. He nodded for opening statements. Kell stood up in a perfect posture. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of equitable distribution. Our client was a material partner." "Material?" The judge interrupted, raising an eyebrow that she nodded at with confidence. "In both the development of the home and the company. Our suit seeks 50% of the equity acquired during the marriage, including assets derived from the recent IPO of the Fenton Enterprise Group." "Which enterprise group?" my lawyer asked quietly. "Which the flickered the public-facing logistics firm, the one now valued at." Carolyn stood up, no speeches, no drama, simply walked to the bench and handed the judge the envelope. He took it, opened it, and started flipping through. First, notarized trust ownership certificates dated 7 years before the IPO. Second, licensing agreements between the core IP trust and the operating company, all with active renewal status and breach clauses, including 17B. Third, independent valuation audits from 2 of the Big Four firms, confirming that the company's intellectual property was privately held and simply leased to the entity that went public. Fourth, a USB drive. The judge slid it into a side port on his terminal, clicked a file, and a presentation of social media screenshots appeared. Every one of her posts claiming ownership, publicly stating her involvement, bragging about what I helped build, and most damningly, the "half is mine" legally post time-stamped, geotagged, and captioned with a stacks that linked to the corporate brand. That he interrupted. "Your Honor, we contest the enforceability of that clause." "Which clause?" the judge asked without looking up. "The clause 17B. Your Honor." The judge finally paused, adjusted his glasses, and said, the clause that nullifies shared access and eliminates rights to profits for any party who files a litigious action while using the assets under license. That clause. Kel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The judge turned to the next page, a compliance memo signed by the original license drafters stating in plain terms, Clause 17b is self-activating upon legal filing. Assets revert, access dissolves, and any claims made while still utilizing said assets may constitute a breach, not an entitlement. He turned back to Kel. You realize this clause has precedent. It has been upheld in federal court twice. It did not occur to you to research that. From her side of the table, she shifted slightly, as if her spine were starting to feel the crack forming at its base. Kel mumbled something about interpretation and intent, but no one was listening anymore. Caroline remained seated with her hands folded, not even looking at me. He about did all the work. The judge flipped through the final piece of evidence, a copy of her notarized signature on the estate renewal documents, which included a small clause about the IP licensing agreement as a domestic expense exception, effectively confirming she knew the brand was leased, not owned. Her initials were right there twice. I leaned back, not smug, not gloating, just still, because I did not need to win. I had already won before she ever filed, and now she was starting to realize that this was not a negotiation, not a settlement. It was a quiet execution of paperwork she never understood. And every smile she had flashed on social media was now Exhibit A in her disqualification. The judge's eyes scanned the final pages of the envelope like a man reading a story whose ending he already knows. He adjusted his glasses, leaned back slightly, and set the paper on the bench in front of him. The room was completely silent, the air thick with the kind of quiet that comes not from a lack of sound, but from the slow, inevitable collapse of misplaced confidence. Then he spoke calmly, almost conversationally. Ma'am, do you understand the nature of Clause 17b? She blinked. It was the first time in this entire performance that her smile did not know what to do with itself. She opened her mouth slightly, then glanced at Kel, her lawyer. He shifted in his seat, coughed, and straightened his tie as if that would give him the answer. Your Honor, he began. We believe that clause is unenforceable due to the nature of marital estate and the commingling of assets. This is a divorce proceeding, not a corporate arbitration. The judge held up a single hand, not angrily, not loudly, just enough to silence the room. Counselor, he said slowly, this clause has been tested and upheld twice in federal court. In both cases, the court found that parties who leverage shared spousal status to breach intellectual property licensing protections forfeit both access and equitable entitlement. You did read the precedent filings, didn't you? Kel's mouth tightened. We interpreted them as context-specific. The judge said, his tone now as neutral as the blade of a guillotine. So you came into my courtroom interpreting federal precedent as optional. He looked back at the documents and turned another page. There is also the matter of your client's public admissions, several of them under her verified social media accounts tagging the licensed corporate brand while making claims of ownership. That matters, counselor, that matters a great deal. She shifted again in her seat. Her hand went to her necklace, the gold one she had bought after the funding series announcement. She twisted it once twice, and then stopped when she realized it was drawing attention. Her face had gone 2 shades paler, and the confidence she wore like perfume had evaporated into something colder. The word nervous did not even cover it. She was quietly, internally, coming apart, like a designer handbag left in the rain. Your Honor, she said finally, her voice too high, too breathy. Surely this is not about some clause hidden in a contract I didn't even sign. The judge looked directly at her. You signed multiple documents referencing the licensing structure, including the disclosures attached to your own estate renewal filings, and you benefited financially, personally, and reputationally from those licensed assets. That matters more than you think. I never understood the details, she mumbled, grasping for pity, for leverage, for something. That, the judge said equanimously, is not a defense. That he tried to interject again. We believe the judge did not let him finish. This is not a belief-based proceeding, counselor. You are not here to debate theology. You are here to explain why your client filed a direct litigious claim while actively benefiting from licensed assets that reverted the moment she did so. I suggest you proceed very carefully. For the first time, Kilo, the courtroom, moments before, a stage for posturing and polished bravado, had become a pressure chamber. Each second ticked louder than the last. Her eyes darted between the exhibits, the judge's face, the envelope on the bench. I could see her finally putting it together. Not the legal mechanics. That was still a fog to her. No, what she put together was simpler, sharper. The control was gone. The narrative, the one where she was half owner, half victim, half everything, had crumbled under the one thing: she never took seriously the structure. I did not move, did not flinch. I just watched her lose altitude. She had walked into court to split an empire, and now she was realizing painfully and publicly that she had never been in it, only around it, only close enough to borrow the glow, but never allowed to hold the torch. And in that room, with every word from the judge stripping her claims down to the bare nerve, she was learning the same lesson every entitled pretender eventually learns. There is no crown for one who has never touched the throne. It took less than 90 minutes for her confidence to die. Now, with the judge's patience wearing thin and the documents doing all the damage, that he did what cornered lawyers always do when the law stops playing fair. He pivoted to poison. We assert, he began, his voice now sharper, more animated, that the defendant intentionally engaged in a deceptive structuring, that the company's network of shell entities, trusts, and offshored assets was built for the express purpose of denying our client her rightful share. This was not a business strategy. It was a marital manipulation. It borders on fraud. He said the word fraud, like a grenade tossed across the courtroom in the desperate hope that it might explode into sympathy. Caroline did not even blink. She reached into her leather briefcase. No zippers, no buckles, just a silent magnetic clasp, and took out one last folder. No drama. Just a quiet slide across the table to the bench. The judge opened it, read, paused, read again, and that is when it all ended. Because what Kel, and more importantly, what she had forgotten in her rush to paint me as the silent villain, was this: the prenuptial agreement, signed, acknowledged, and dated 3 years before the company even had a product, let alone a valuation. It was all there, clean, clear, witnessed, notarized. The premarital financial disclosure was exhaustive, down to the last dollar in my brokerage account and the IP applications I filed when I was still writing code in my parents' basement. She had signed it all, smiling, drunk on love, probably thinking she was doing me a favor. And now it was the guillotine she had handed me years ago. Blade polished, mechanism oiled, hammer cocked. The judge turned the page, then looked at Kel with all the compassion of a man checking a box. Unless you are alleging forgery, this document precludes almost all of your client's claims. It outlines the license structure. It identifies the trust beneficiaries. It even lists the names of the entities, some of which you just accused the defendant of concealing. If she did not understand them, she should have asked. Kel leaned back quietly. His hands gripped the table like a man trying not to vomit. She stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the polished floor. Her fingers trembled as she pointed at me across the room. Do you think you are just going to walk away from this? She hissed, her voice low and guttural. Do you think you will just disappear with everything we built as if I was never there? I did not answer. I just looked at her with that same flat, unreadable stare I had perfected in the boardroom. The one that says, you have already lost. I just haven't told you where yet. Because there was nothing left to say, nothing worth responding to. She was not arguing justice anymore. She was flailing in a courtroom she thought she owned, only to find that every inch of it had been surveyed, mapped, and mined by me years before she even understood what an LLC series meant. Her anger was not about the money. Not really, it was about the humiliation. She thought she was clever. She thought she could post little digs online, file the suit with cameras watching, strut into court with a $600 haircut, and walk out with a check. Instead, she was bleeding, not from wounds she could see, but from every contract she never read, every clause she ignored, every initial conversation she dismissed as boring founder stuff. She looked at me as if she did not recognize the man she married. And maybe she did not, because the man she married gave her luxury, security, the spotlight. But the man in front of her now, he was the architect of her silence, and he was not throwing her a rope. He was watching her sink because she chose the tide. The weeks bled into each other like spilled ink. She did not post anything for the first 3 days after the trial. probably expecting some miracle motion or a legal mistake that would throw the whole case back into chaos and give her the victory she believed she deserved. But it did not come, nothing did. And the silence for a woman who curated her life like a luxury catalog was the loudest verdict of all. On the fourth day, the victim campaign began. Her Instagram reactivated not with champagne toasts or photos in branded bathrobes, but with vague captions over moody selfies. Some things aren't fair, but karma always finds its way. A candle, a glass of wine, the carefully chosen lighting of someone trying to look strong in the storm. She posted a photo of herself wrapped in a blanket on a patio chair, restarting, refocusing, reclaiming, but no one cared. The comments were not what she expected. No sisterhood, no army of angry girlfriends, just silence. Or worse, curiosity disguised as kindness. Wait, didn't you say the company was yours too? He didn't build it alone. Why did your lawyer drop the case? Because he had officially. I got the email notification. Plaintiff's counsel has filed for withdrawal of representation due to an irreconcilable conflict in direction. Translation. Even he knew the ship was sinking and he was not getting paid enough to go down with it. She tried to reach out to the investors she bragged about knowing at dinners she had hosted, the founders she once called our inner circle. No one returned her calls. One even texted me directly. She is reaching out to people. Should we be worried? I told him not to. There was nothing to worry about. Her plan B, if she ever had one, was based on borrowed glow. Her value was proximity, and now that proximity had evaporated. No one wants to bet on a person whose last headline involved a judge laughing in court and legal clauses that erased her credibility. She tried to host a private brunch to reset the narrative. She rented a rooftop cafe, invited a dozen women from the wellness and crypto circle she dabbled in. Only 3 showed up. 1 left after 10 minutes. The other 2 stayed long enough to post a selfie and then tagged a completely different location in their stories. Optics matter. Behind the scenes, it got uglier. The accountant she used to optimize her private spending started asking questions. Apparently, the transfers she made from certain shared accounts to marketing projects were flagged as suspicious after the case went public. Her tax returns were red flagged. An investigation was open, not criminal, not yet, but enough to send warning letters, enough to freeze one of her liquidity lines. She tried to go back to the vineyard. The gates did not open because the vineyard was under a trust. The same trust she had approved 5 years ago in exchange for early access to a delegated asset. As she called it at the time, she had traded long-term rights for a short-term lifestyle, and now that lifestyle was gone. The house was not hers. It was leased through a holding company as a temporary, rotational occupancy asset with a clause that gave the holding entity the right to repurpose or reclaim the property at the end of any fiscal quarter. That quarter was up. She came home one afternoon and found movers wrapping the furniture, not with malice, just protocol. The new tenant, a junior executive from one of my partner firms, was moving in temporarily. The lease had already been transferred. She tried to argue with the foreman. He showed her the paperwork. She was not listed anywhere. She made one last post after that. No photos, no tags, just black text on a white background. Be careful who you build with. They might just bury you under the foundations. I did not reply. Neither did anyone else. She did not get messages of support. She got screenshots. The kind of screenshots people whisper about at scenes pass around in group chats, dissect in side comments. She was not a lifestyle icon anymore. She was a cautionary tale. And the worst part, she still did not understand that the empire she thought she was owed, the one she posed in, the one she tagged, the one she toasted with glasses she never paid for, was never built for her. It was built around her, designed to look inclusive until the moment it was not. And now all that was left of her kingdom was the sound of silence from the same people who once asked her for favors, invitations, sponsorships, silence, and a folder full of screenshots she could not cash in. She looked nothing like the woman who walked into that first hearing. The salon blowouts were gone, the nails chipped. The designer blazer had been swapped for a gray cardigan that hung on her like a surrender. Her eyes were bloodshot, not from crying. She was too proud to show that, but from sheer exhaustion, legal fatigue, public silence, private collapse. The gallery was half empty now. No press, no the brunch girls in sunglasses pretending to be emotional support. Just her new pro bono lawyer, a kid who looked like he had passed the bar 6 minutes ago, and me, sitting exactly where I had always been. Second row, same posture, same expression. The judge entered as if he had somewhere better to be, which he probably did. He glanced at the stack of closing documents Caroline had filed the week before. A final compilation of ownership structures, valuations, and the revised clauses activated by the lawsuit. A binder bound with the sober elegance of silent destruction, he flipped it open, scanned for a few seconds, then stopped and chuckled not loudly. Not cruelly, just a quiet, involuntary laugh, as if something was too absurd not to register. "Ma'am," he said without looking up yet, "I am reading a summary here that flatly contradicts the basis of your financial claim. It states, and I quote, 'The defendant has at no time been salaried, contracted, or otherwise employed by the entity in question.'" She blinked slowly, her lips parted. She still did not understand. The judge looked up now directly at her. "He doesn't work for the company." She opened her mouth to object, to protest, to say yes, but he is the founder. He is the face, the name, the empire. He continued. "He owns it privately through multiple irrevocable vehicles. The operating entity you filed against is not the source of his wealth. It is simply a licensee. Your claim is based on alleged employment-based compensation, but he is not and never has been an employee." Her lawyer, or whatever low-cost replacement she could afford after Kel quit, dropped his pen. It rolled off the desk and hit the floor. No one bent down to get it. She stood there motionless, as if she had stopped breathing just to delay the moment the words fully hit her. Because this was not just a loss, this was a razor blade. It meant the division of marital property did not include the company. It meant she had no claim to the equity, no standing to sue, no leverage for a settlement, no public image to threaten. Everything she had flaunted online, every post, every wine glass, every "we built this together" caption had been a borrowed costume worn to someone else's masquerade ball. And now the host had turned on the lights. I stood up, no smile, no words, just a small adjustment of my jacket sleeve and a nod to Caroline, who did not even bother to pack up her things yet. She knew she would not be back. The door creaked faintly as I left, not dramatically, just enough for her to hear the final sound of my departure. She did not look at me, did not call out. She just stared straight ahead with glazed eyes, her lips pressing into a line so flat it could have been a scar. She had wanted a spectacle, a war, a show. What she got was a clean removal. No fireworks, no headlines, just a legal record, one she can never rewrite, erase, or reframe. Because when she went public, she assumed the story would follow her buy-in. But I was not acting, I was executing, and now it is permanent.